Good morning. My name is Morgan Fielding, and along with my group members Daniel, Nicole, and Michael, we will be talking about our strategy analysis of General Motors. Now, to start with a brief overview of what we'll be talking about, it's going to start with a quick current background of General Motors, as well as the internal and external environment analysis, competitive corporate and global strategies, a quick snapshot of their current financials, and a few recommendations that we have for some of the current issues that GM is facing. Now, General Motors today is comprised in the U.S. of 4 motor vehicle companies, including Buick, Cadillac, Chevrolet, and GMC. They also have controlling interests in Opel and Vauxhall in Europe, as well as the company of Holden in Australia. They employ over 200,000 employees across 400 facilities globally, and they also have joint ventures in China and Korea and are currently looking to further expand in South America, as well as we'll be taking a look further on at their 2013 financials. Starting with the external analysis of the auto industry itself, you have some political issues that are currently happening. Those of which are starting with climate change. Climate change has become a globally rising issue, and many government agencies are now forcing car companies in every country, every continent, to now look at the considerations of the emissions that their cars are producing. And now the government has stepped in, and as you'll see in our legal analysis, they are beginning to implement miles per gallon standards, EPA standards, as well as highway crash standards. All of these different agencies together do add certain forces that all car companies do have to greatly consider. Additionally, economic conditions for the auto industry greatly consist of what type of market they're going into. It's important for a company to have the scalability of being able to produce a car, such as in Russia, for cheap, whereas the average worker is paid much less than that of the US, but also they can't sacrifice the quality of which they would be building the cars, otherwise they would not be able to sell the cars. And similarly in China, whereas every day there are new millionaires and they're seeking out cars that are more luxurious and bigger. So auto industries have to be able to scale to both a growing upper class as well as an even expanding lower class. Some social implications also include the fact that transportation needs to be reliable. People look at their cars nowadays as long-term investments, and they depend on the reliability, as well as an increase of the need for fuel efficiency with rising oil and gas prices. People have become much more conscious of how good their gas mileage for their vehicle is in order to increase cost savings. Further going on, in the technology area, there is demand for alternative fuels, whether it's solar power, electric power, hydrogen cell power, hybrid alternative fuels. It's important that all car brands nowadays are breaking into new innovative technologies, as well as be able to scale and increase the scope of this production worldwide, whereas there are many economies of which would not be able to afford such innovations in technology. As we said earlier, global climate change and greenhouse gas emissions are always a rising and exponential concern when it comes to the auto industry, and legal concerns including fuel and environmental standards as previously mentioned, as well as the employment issue here in the US for GM is based on a heavy labor-run auto workers union. This means that employment really is very difficult to negotiate with in the sense that they're all have the ability for collective bargaining. And as well as auto companies will have to take into consideration foreign employment laws, where many companies do require a certain percentage, whether it be 50, 60, 70% of their employees being local employees.
Now we're going to discuss Porter's 5 forces a little bit, starting with rivalry between competitors. So rivalry between competitors is very intense due to market saturation and the entrance of foreign competitors into many different markets such as Honda, Toyota, and Nissan. And there's competition at all price points and in all target markets. Therefore, there is a lack of differentiation at this point. In addition, the threat of new entry is relatively low because of the large scale and complexity of the operations currently happening. And it is very difficult to capture market share due to the high rivalry that already exists. The threat of substitutes is very low because planes, trains, and ships outside of urban areas are very inconvenient for consumers to use. And in addition, the complementars, such as gas and oil, are relatively inelastic, therefore they do not factor too much into a consumer's decision to buy a car. In addition, the bargaining power of buyers has been increasing in recent years because buyer decisions are very based on price, and there are low switching costs between different similar products. And lastly, the bargaining power of suppliers is very low because there are many options and suppliers cannot vertically integrate into the market.
Okay, so moving forward, we're going to begin discussing the internal analysis, beginning with management, people, and culture. In 2012, GM implemented an enterprise risk management program, but it really wasn't successful. Proper oversight was never executed, and further studies prove that the ignition malfunction could have been prevented had they followed the actual plan that they had put forward. We'll discuss further the ignition malfunction when we speak about recommendations. GM is also looking to be a leader in advanced technology, and they really strive to foster innovation in their company culture. Engineers are a critical resource that allow for strategic innovative risks and is a real core competency for them. Moving into resources and environmental impact, GM is really focused on reducing their overall environmental impact. They do this by focusing on their electric hybrid models and stressing the importance of their 122 landfill-free facilities. The environmental impact is also really built into their culture, and they believe that this allows teams to think creatively, consistently innovate, and be leaner and more efficient. The value chain, we can see that GM receives parts from approximately 9,000 dealers from the US, Canada, and other places. The original value chain was focused more on packaging parts, sending those parts to designated suppliers in over 200 locations, and paying upfront shipping costs. In recent years, they brought in UPS supply chain solutions to manage door-to-door inventory management and streamline the technology. Moving into GM's core competencies and competitive advantages, we can see that research and development is a competitive advantage, specifically in terms of fuel efficiency with their hybrid models. Corporate culture is another competitive advantage because the culture fosters risk-taking and innovation, which gives GM a competitive advantage. GM is also unique that it offers OnStar technology in all vehicles, and this is not offered in any other major automotive companies currently to date. GMAC is a competency because it allows GMC to sell a higher volume of vehicles to their target market through providing multiple financing options. Lastly, brand recognition is a core competency that leads to saliency in consumers' minds. Looking at GM's competitive analysis, we can see that GMC positions itself as a differentiator because they reach many different target markets with many different brands at different price points. Their brands are mostly all positioned as mid-price for each target market segment, and customers place a premium and are willing to pay for the perceived value of safety and GMC brand recognition. GMC also practices economies of scope with their offering of over 55 brands worldwide.
Hi, I'm now going to talk about GM's corporate strategy. GM has a low level of vertical integration and has integrated downstream in several ways. They have control over how they manufacture their vehicles by buying finished components themselves and using them in manufacturing. They do not buy any raw materials themselves. One important factor to GM is how they build their own engines, giving them a unique advantage over competition. GM is able to market their products to the end consumer, but they sell their vehicles to various dealerships. GM has pursued a global corporate strategy, as Dan will talk about, but in doing so, GM has acquired various car manufacturers and joint ventures in markets that they are currently in, creating a high level of horizontal integration. GM has diversified within the car manufacturing industry by offering vehicles at multiple price points to several different markets globally. 98% of GM's revenue comes from automotive sales. Because of this, they are not diversified across multiple industries and can be considered a single business. Here you can see several important financial figures of GM and its competitors, Ford, Volkswagen, and Toyota in 2013. We chose 2013 because we have full financial data for all four companies. GM has the third highest revenue and cost of sales, second highest general and administration costs, and lowest revenue. GM needs to figure out ways to lower their overall costs and increase their bottom line margins. Here we have mapped out the car manufacturing industry's brands as strategic groups. Perception in this figure is defined as the perceived value, reliability, and efficiency of the vehicle to the customer, and price is defined as the average price of all cars in each specific brand. Using data from Consumer Reports, we can see that Toyota and Ford have the most perceived value, followed by Chevrolet. As Dan mentioned, there is tough competition at all price points, and GM must find ways to increase their brand perceptions while offering competitive prices.
In regards to global strategy, specifically the locations and brands, GM sold 9.9 million vehicles in 2014, and it wants to expand further into the markets of Asia and Europe. In addition, it has several large international operations, including in China, Brazil, the United Kingdom, Russia, Germany, Mexico, and South Korea. GM is also interested in expanding into India because the growth rate there is supposed to be 54.3% for the auto market between 2014 and 2018. And finally, GM has several strong global brands, including Opel, Vohal, Holden, Baojun, and Xifang. In regards to mode of entry and responsiveness, GM's primary mode of entry is export, followed by joint venture and acquisition, and GM has several strong joint ventures in China, Korea, and Russia. GM's joint venture in China with SAIC has helped the Chinese sales increase to 9% more than 2014 this year, and it also employs a transnational strategy, which means it will adhere to price sensitivity in countries by reducing costs and ensure that it localizes its products to fit consumer needs. GM is struggling in Ukraine, Russia, and India because Ukraine and Russia are having a conflict currently, and India, the automotive market, although the expectation is for increase, has not been doing as well as expected.
Now, a few of the current issues and challenges that General Motors is facing are internal and very much publicly known now, starting with terrible risk management oversight. In December 2013, an investigation was launched into GM for faulty ignition switches, which inadvertently would cause drivers to lose control of the cars and has so far caused multiple fatal accidents that have been linked to this issue. Now, this issue wasn't brand new. This issue started nearly a decade ago. However, GM had no risk management plan in place to elevate issues, defects, or anything from engineers and line workers all the way up to middle management. And by this point, even when middle management perceived issues, they were afraid of bearing bad news to the executives, and therefore they would also choose to ignore this issue and hope that it would go away. This created a very bureaucratic and lax corporate environment throughout General Motors that essentially meant any issue or any problem that would arise or should definitely be brought to attention would no longer be looked at. And once this all became public, General Motors' public relations image was severely, severely hurt. Many people decided to either get rid of the current car that they had or just completely switch brands altogether. This also stemmed from the fact that GM's initial solution to this problem was bearing the responsibility on customers and telling them to make their keychains lighter in order to try to avoid this fix, rather than GM accepting responsibility and fixing it themselves. And even though they've made strides in innovation and technology, these issues have very much hurt the bottom line and has caused loss of customers. GM now is facing multi-million-dollar lawsuits and will have to incorporate hundreds of millions of dollars in forced recalls by the government to fix this issue at hand. Now, they do have a new CEO, Mary Barra, who when she arrived there, she actually did not know of this issue as well because of the type of culture that GM had been experiencing. So a few things that she needs to do now that she is there: she needs to get rid of any key executive management as well as engineers and line workers who were tied to the development and implementation of the ignition switch, and as well as had full knowledge of the issues and chose to ignore them. With this, she will allow for transparency. She can address to the public as well as all levels of employees in the company, hey, this is what's going on. We know we've had a problem and we know that we messed up, but we're here to fix it, and here's what we're going to do. Every step, and including the fact that GM was bailed out by the government in 2011, every step really does need to be outlined for the consumer to make sure that everything is going accordingly and that this issue cannot happen again. Also, they need to redevelop their risk management program that allows for issues to be quickly elevated to senior management. Ford, for example, when they had a new chief executive, he encouraged bad news and wanted everyone to report bad news to him. In that case, he actually developed a program of which if people elevated and solved issues and created innovations and technologies to avoid the issues in the future, they would actually receive promotions as incentives. And currently, Ms. Barish should try to implement such a similar program to make sure that if there needs to be a cause for whistleblowing, that it can be done and it can be heard. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation on General Motors. We hope you enjoyed it.